Hello. I would like to talk about the last 4 years of my life, and it's been bad. And I'm thinking about titling this video. I don't know Lucy Letby or her family, but I think I know how she might have felt. This is about DARVO, D-A-R-V-O. It's about character assassination, discrimination against vulnerable people. When you ask for help because you need help, you might have tried for a long time to find solutions and help yourself. And when you are self-aware enough to be the person asking for help, you might just find that a lot of the people you're asking are not available because they're more traumatized than you are. There's different ways that trauma can affect us, and to me, I categorise it as inward blame and outward blame. So for somebody like me, the experiences I had, including CEN when I was ever since I was born, as far as I know, or definitely since I was 2, because I can remember some situations from that age. I simultaneously put the blame on myself of not being able to make the people around me okay, and I put my energy out of myself onto other people. So that ever since then I've always been other focused, trying to make other people alright, trying to give them the opportunity to feel comfortable and never to feel any pain. The other side that can go is shutting down to the level of not being able to be self-aware, and therefore everything or a lot of things are usually projected. So this is not the category I fall into, but this is the one I'm all too aware of because it's been used against me by people around me. Some close family members have this pattern of being so unaware of their own trauma that it's an immediate lashing out. So if their ego is a tiny bit threatened, then it's all back on you. Okay. If you haven't heard of DARVO, it's, hopefully I get this right, deny, attack, reverse, victim and offender. So people in that second category, I believe, this is my take on things, use that method to protect their sense of self. And people in my category, I don't know if we're all the same, but for me, definitely, I didn't have a self. I didn't have a sense of self. So there's no need to protect any sense of self because it's not there. So it's a kind of like denial of self. Not doing that on purpose, but maybe sometimes doing that on purpose as well, because it's a kind of there's no belief that I exist in the first place. When I was in my late 20s, I noticed that I didn't feel like I existed, and I didn't have an awareness of myself, and I came up with an affirmation, something along the lines of, I have as much right to exist as everybody else. And you know, if you say something like that when it's just so far away from your sense of reality up till that point, if you've ever used affirmations, it's hard to even get that out of your mouth because it just feels so alien that you can't even say it. So I started to say that, and then I started to just gradually, that's about 7 years ago, I gradually started to notice the fact that, oh, this is difficult to say. I hadn't realised, and I'd always been having a lot of internal experiences but not being able to communicate them outwardly and get them into a connection with other people because of my well, I've talked about that in the other videos, so go and watch those please. So right, what happened to me? I've had a you're going to look at me and think I'm so privileged, but I've had a very hard life. I am very privileged and I've had a very hard life. That is co-occurring. I live in a rich country. I have grown up with family around me. My parents never divorced. They loved each other. I had also most of my grandparents around me or accessible when I was growing up. Having said all that, I was very alone my whole life because I couldn't interact with people because of my dyspraxia and my verbal dyspraxia. I couldn't speak, I couldn't think, and I couldn't speak. I could think things very deep down inside and I could feel things, but I didn't have any way of translating that further along. So everything's always been a very physical journey to me. I was just thinking about the fact that I've never done a long video before, so let's hope my stamina can go with this one. I want to be patient with myself because I have had a lifetime of censoring myself as well as feeling like censored by the world around me. Right, so where was I up to? I'm just going to get back into it. I always had postural issues because of my dyspraxia and upper body problems, like difficulties with proprioception, and another sense I've wanted to get into, I'll do a separate video, is called interoception. So it's how we feel, how we notice our body sensations like hunger, pain, thirsty, emotions I think come into it. I feel like dyspraxics, but me anyway, for myself, feel these things more so, but we don't know what to do with the information. So we can have problems with things like when to go to the toilet. And that used to be, I mean, it's still a problem for me. I'm talking about just going for a number one. Like, I just don't know when, because I can feel it straight away. Then you're not just going to keep going to the toilet every 10 seconds, every 10 minutes. Some children do, because if they have these kind of different levels with their interoception sense, then as soon as they feel like they need to go to the toilet, then they're going to go to the toilet. It's like we're not quite sure how to handle it when we have these different sensations going on. So in high school it just got harder and harder because, it wasn't harder and harder, it was always hard through high school. I couldn't find the way around. If I needed the toilet, then I didn't really know when to go. And if I went to the toilet, it was break time. I couldn't find it. Because I get lost easily, things look similar. In the building, there used to be a kind of like, let's say a I'd have to like really think about this, but basically, to give you the idea, there would be like a maths block and then a science block, but to me it looked the same, and the turning was in the same corner looked the same, and the corner where you would turn looked the same, and which door do you go in from the yard to get to the toilet block, etc. By the time I found it, which was quite scary because I might get lost, because if I was going on my own in break time quickly trying to go, then it takes me ages because it just takes us a lot longer to do things because things are fiddly. Like I'm just talking about like going in the cubicle and locking the door and things like that. To someone who's not dyspraxic, they just seem to be able to just do it like that. And to me, I can't. Like every action takes time. Seems to take longer time because every movement I do, I have to focus on moving the muscles and moving my body in that way. It can't just happen without me concentrating on it. It's like I'm mindful all the time. Okay, mindfulness. Don't try and sell it to me because it's my life. So I would have problems with trying to get things done, like going to the toilet in time before going back from break. Then if my friends hadn't been with me, then I'd have to try and find out where we're going next, because I just used to follow this one girl around all the time. She was so organised. Luckily, I used to follow her. She always knew what lesson we had and I just used to follow her. And if she wasn't there, I was lost. I used to like walk home from school and wet myself because I hadn't been to the toilet at the right time and I didn't understand how long things were going to take. It was so awful because at that age you feel a little bit like, I don't know if I felt like an adult, but I was always treated like a little adult when I was a child. I used to get my mum saying, "Oh, you're so mature. Oh, she's so mature." And I was not mature. I was just terrified. I was just silent and terrified and trying to do the right thing and be good. All I ever wanted was to just prove that I'm a good person, because I'm very pure in my intentions, and I'm not trying to say this to show off or something. It's part of my naivety with my disabilities. It's a good thing, but a lot of people, because they're not like that, they can misunderstand and feeling misunderstood. When you want to do good and you want to be good and you are good inside, it's very, very painful if somebody thinks or tells you or says about you that you are not, or tells lies about you or makes up some kind of intentions which you never had and attributes them to you. High school was a big challenge. You know, there's a lot of years. In England, we spend a lot of years at high school. We don't have middle school, so we're there for years. And there were lots of different challenges along the way. There was a point when I was getting bullied by looking like a pop group, because the person in the pop group was a boy. And that's not why, but I had the same hairstyle and I looked like that boy, and I wasn't a boy. I mean, I'm not a boy. I wasn't there. Do you know what I mean? Because I can't get the grammar with that one. So, because I've always had this kind of leaning towards like being androgynous, I am comfortable in my sex and I'm a female, but I've always felt a bit sort of like I don't really associate with some typical female traits, and people like me, we're like this, like we get on better with men or we get on better with people of a different age group. It's a kind of autistic trait as well sometimes, because I don't like gossiping. I can't do it anyway. Not good at chatting and small talk. I can only talk about serious things or like deep and meaningful. And I'm quite practical, even though I'm rubbish at practical things because I'm dyspraxic. I am hands-on and practical. I'm like in the physical world in that sense. So getting on with boys is a lot easier, but then that brings a lot of challenges with mixing the sexes, and like at what point does somebody feel attracted to somebody else and stuff like that. So I've done a video about that, which is the dangers of being asexual, which I class myself as being. I got picked on for looking like a boy, and I always felt like I'm mixing two things there, but I used to get mistaken for a boy because I have a very thin figure, and I never became a kind of curvy figure at that point in my life. When everybody started going through puberty, I didn't really change in the way I was kind of hoping to as a girl, and it gave me a sense of being a kind of failure, like my body wasn't right, and I didn't look in my like physical body shape. I didn't look the way that I felt like I wanted to be, kind of like more what was classed as feminine in the culture at the time. So then being picked on for looking like a male pop star, it hurt me quite deeply, and it went on for a few years as well. It hurt me quite deeply because he was a male, and at the same time I was considered attractive, so it was a weird situation because some people were considering me to be pretty, and then some people were considering me to look like this boy, and then they used to sing the song at me, and it was just so awful to go through because I was I'd always been very self-conscious, and I had social anxiety disorder caused by my issues with my coordination of my body and my dyspraxia. Whenever I had to walk across a space like the schoolyard, for example, it was already excruciating because I felt like I wasn't present in my body. Not that I felt like I wasn't, if that makes sense. So I always felt like I was kind of like floating up here somewhere. I wasn't in here, that's for sure, and I wasn't in here. I wasn't in my body, and I wasn't in my head either. I was like somewhere higher than that, which is difficult because I couldn't just sort of like go along, but I had to. So crossing the yard was so excruciating, and then I used to get sang at. So from somewhere over there or somewhere over there, somebody would sing a song at me by that pop group. I don't know how to handle that. It was just like melting into myself. It was so humiliating for me. And you know, once when we were young, I saw my sister get criticised by a boy. They were going on a school bus for a trip somewhere, and then he said something like, oh, it's, whatever. And then she just turned around and went, oh, shut up, Alex. And I just felt so much like amazement at that kind of assertiveness, because I would never be able to do that. Even in this day and age, I don't know, this day and age, even now, this age, maybe that's what I'm trying to say, I don't think I would be confident enough to react that way. And at that age, just to think like, you could just bat that back to somebody, they're just being annoying, you could just say shut up, and then that's the end of it. I was just, my mind was blown by that. I was so far away from being able to like get things out of my mouth which I needed to be able to say to communicate. So then when I was in my late teens, I started getting all these jobs and stuff because I hated school so much. By the time I was 16, I had 3 part-time jobs outside school. So I had something that made me feel useful. I was doing work. And one of the jobs was in a restaurant, and because of I was young, 16, and I didn't have any kind of guidance from anyone at all. Okay, and I didn't have any sort of protection from anyone. And I don't want to put my parents down. Okay, I don't mean it that way. The situation was what it was, and everybody was living the best that they could. I got attacked by a man who I worked with in one of my part-time jobs in the restaurant, the one in the restaurant, and it was quite severe. And the follow-up as well was very traumatizing because I didn't know how to make sense of what had happened to me, and I still saw him again afterwards. I was still working there, and I was sort of in a fawn response, and he would just ignore me. That was really painful as well because I'd been through CEN when I was, all my childhood. I'm just putting this on my hands because I noticed they're really dry. Okay. Now, after that happened, and I was very into my athletics at that point, which was including cross-country running, and I loved it because it gave me this kind of sense of being in my body, which I didn't usually have. This is one of the reasons I loved it. I loved going fast. Not that I was really fast at cross-country, but I was a bit of a sprinter. So I like going fast and moving fast. Running, by the way, is easier than walking for dyspraxics. Well, I would say, I'm guessing this applies to all of us, but it might not. Because with walking, you have to keep trying to work out what you're doing. You watch my video about walking. I'm not very good at walking at all. But running, especially once I'd been trained on how to use my arms, you get into the momentum and you're going along. It carries you along. Something makes that a lot easier. So it was something that I felt like I could do, which physical, but I wasn't sort of flailing all over the place as much by the time I'd learnt this arms movement. I hurt my shoulder. I was doing these kind of like stretches where obviously you're going to do stretches when you warm up and cool down, etc. And I'd been doing some where I was like pulling my arms behind my back and leaning forward, and I pulled here, and it really hurt, and it never got better. It just got worse after that. Okay, so now I know that it was a fascia injury, and I know something about which parts of the body ended up being sort of pulled in the wrong positions, and it's been I was going to say lifelong. I'm coming up to 40 now, and I was 16, 17 at the time, so it's been in that sense it's been a lifelong injury that has stopped me from doing athletics, and eventually I became so disabled by not being able to heal that problem that I couldn't use my arms, I couldn't sit down, I couldn't stand for more than about 14 seconds, and I couldn't walk, all linked from that initial injury, which happened just after the attack that I'd gone through. And because I'd been through neglect, being attacked and then not being able to share that with anybody and not being able to talk about it at the time or make sense of it myself because I don't have conscious thought, I don't have thoughts that I can hear in my head, it confirmed to me things like I don't exist, I'm not important, my body's just valueless. That was the kind of maybe fears that I'd always had, sort of that self-denial that seemed to be proved by that experience. And then the pain started with this shoulder issue, and by the time I was in my 20s, I just remember this really clearly, but I'm guessing this was always the case since after I hurt the shoulder, that I couldn't carry things even if they were very, very light. So I remember when I lived in York and I had a Japanese friend who was very kind and sweet, And we were out together, and I think we went to a cafe, or at least I went to show her where this particular cafe was that I knew about. And I used to try to make things as light as possible because I had difficulty carrying things. And I'm talking about the extent that I couldn't carry a handbag. Maybe I should just say first, have I still got that book out? I was going to mention this, it's one of the reflexes. It's one of the neonatal reflexes, and this is called Palmar reflex. I don't actually need to show you the book, but anyway, I'm going to talk about that briefly. This is one of the reasons I think that my shoulder hurts when I use my hand, because up until a few weeks ago, I still had that retained reflex that, you know, when you see a baby, you know, when you offer your finger to the baby and then it grabs your hand. It's a reflex, even though it's really cute. Then you find out, oh, it just does that as a reflex. It's not just because it just loves you so much, even though it probably does. But like, you know, when you sort of like go, hopefully you know what I'm talking about. I still had that reflex up until a few weeks ago. So if you'd gone like this, then my hand would close. And these kind of retained reflexes are at play with people with conditions like dyspraxia. So we're still using our body in that way. Without integrating the reflex, it makes things a lot harder. Maybe this is why I got the book out, because, right, it's the list here of what can be caused by not having that reflex integrated. Palmar reflex retention may lead to poor fine motor skills, awkward use of hands, inappropriate pencil grip, poor handwriting, poor posture when playing piano or working with the hands, difficulty processing ideas onto paper or computer, poor posture and back pain when working at a desk or computer, difficulty spelling or writing. So there's a lot of complexity to how the brain and body ideally would have developed, and then if it hadn't gone through those stages, things can go wrong. So there's other reflexes at play, but I think that's one of the reasons that I have trouble carrying things, because I was out with the Japanese friend that day, and I had a plastic bag, so you can't really get much lighter than that, and then I think it had a tissue in it in case I needed to wipe my nose, and like probably my bank card just in like a plastic case, and we must have had phones by then, I'm guessing, so my phone. So whatever didn't fit in my pocket, that was it. That was just the bare minimum amount of stuff that I absolutely had to take with me to just be out and about, and I couldn't carry it, and I was in so much pain. It hurt my shoulder to carry that thing, and this is still an issue that I struggle with. It's really difficult to carry things for me, and it's linked to the fascia injury. Okay, so that's, I don't know enough about it to explain the whole thing, but maybe I'll learn and then I'll tell you at a later date. So I had to ask my friend to carry the plastic bag, and she was kind enough to not sort of judge me at all. She just carried the bag. She was kind about it, and it was fine. She carried the bag, and then I could carry on walking because I just could not. And by the way, I always feel like I have to say this because of the stigma around pain conditions. I have a high pain threshold. I'm not soft. I'm very tough. I'm a northerner. I'm tough. I don't mind childbirth. I've been through it twice. It didn't hurt me. I'm not soft. I bump myself all the time, and I don't notice, because it's like sometimes with when you have sensory processing disorder and different experience with your senses when you're neurodiverse, if that's a word, I can never get that word right, you might under or over get stimulated by certain things. So to me, often I would have bruises all over my legs, and sometimes they're really big. So I think, oh, what did I do? I must have really hit that, but I didn't even notice. So yeah, I just felt like I had to get that little, is that a disclaimer? Whatever it is, it's just very annoying. It's very like you know, when you take credit away from somebody. If you're saying to somebody like, oh, you've got a pain condition, it's in your head, you need to get used to feeling pain. No, that's nothing to do with it. Okay, right, I know that's something to do with it, right, but it's not the whole story. So that is a different video. Back to the part where I'm explaining that I can't carry stuff. When I first became a mum, alhamdulillah, that was 8 years ago, and I found out that I can't, I mean, I knew this actually, to be honest, I did know this, but I don't think I'd put two and two together because I don't always make links. Whereas people might have seen something as a pattern, to me it could happen, something could happen for years before I realised, like, oh, right, that's what happens. If that happens, then that happens. I don't really, my brain doesn't work that in that sense. So when I had my daughter, I couldn't hold her, but obviously I needed to hold her and I wanted to hold her, and I breastfed her for 2 years. Alhamdulillah. I was very determined. I couldn't push the pram because it was too painful because of my shoulder and fascia injuries and my dyspraxia. I couldn't push the pram and I couldn't hold her, and I had to do those things sometimes anyway. And of course I wanted to do those things because that's my child, and I always wanted to be a mum, so I am a mum. I'm really grateful for that. When I had my second child, that was when it became a really big issue, because my second marriage was a sham. I was approached by somebody who promised to come and lead the family and give the support that I needed, and apparently we were going to have all these children and everything was going to be good, but that was a kind of like pretty picture that had been painted, and it wasn't actually going to be the reality. So as soon as I got pregnant, I also became single, and I was already severely disabled by that point. I tried to go back to work earlier that year, and I'd had a lot of demands put on me about what I needed, how many hours I needed to do, and I'd ended up getting so ill that I couldn't manage my day-to-day life anymore. So I was really desperate to have this person who was offering to come and be my husband and partner with me in life, to come and we would support each other, and things would get easier. So that's not what happened, and then I ended up single and pregnant and with my daughter. So after a few weeks, first of all, I didn't realise that you were supposed to go and tell the doctor when you get pregnant, so I was late with that, so everything was a little bit out of kilter. And then I explained to the doctor that I can't carry a baby. I can carry the baby, okay, when it's inside. That's not what I mean by carry. I can't hold the baby because of this shoulder injury. And I haven't got anyone here. I was extremely isolated, and I'd been housebound a lot of times throughout that 1 to 2 years that I couldn't do a lot of necessary tasks. 2019, around that time, 2018. And the doctor wrote some letters and made some referrals asking for help for me, and I approached social services to ask for help with daily tasks, and the assessment was horrific. I've got the way I think of it now, it's like there were 2 evil social workers and 2 stupid social workers, and throw in a very dizzy health visitor who meant well but created a lot of disaster. The first social worker who interviewed me for my needs assessment, she would keep me on the phone for hours listening to me talk about what my needs were and what I struggle with day to day. And I was in the position I've just described. I was a single mum. My daughter was in the house with me because there was nobody helping me. There wasn't anyone available and there wasn't anyone there. Just me and my daughter. Very isolated, and she was interviewing me for hours at a time, and I had so much difficulty with my voice. And when she said, near the beginning, she asked me a question along the lines of, can you communicate effectively? Yes. And she just ticked it and moved on. It was so exhausting. I kept explaining that this is really difficult. It's very taxing to, and I couldn't say it in these ways back then because this development of my ability to speak has happened very gradually over this 4-year period. Well, I started it before that, so 6-year period. But to get to this level of speaking, I was nowhere near this point, at that point. So I couldn't explain things clearly, but I did try. I definitely said things, and she discounted them. And when I said, I'm finding this really challenging, and she replied, oh, this is the easy part. The difficult part is finding the right care company to support you. She completely discounted what I was saying. And I contacted children's services. I started getting into more pain now, so just try and adjust my position. I contacted children's services and explained the situation, and they started immediately with the manipulation techniques. They tried to force me to let them contact the father. And they said to me, well, something's not adding up because you said that he told you he wanted to have a baby. And I was saying, exactly. They didn't get it at all. A lot of domestic abuse situations, by the way, and dynamics that happen in an abusive relationship, most professionals, unfortunately, know nothing about it. And the way they react to victims is really damaging. They know nothing, and it's not good. Don't open up to the wrong person because your life will be destroyed. So I'm going to try and skip ahead a bit. There was a document written, which I found later, by the way, after things had gone really bad, that said children's services were going to make sure I was supported. I was doing a great job as a mother, which, hats off to me. I have done a great job as a mother. I've always put my heart into it, and I am very caring about my children's needs. But I have a lot of challenges to look after myself because of my dyspraxia, and then I have my physical disabilities, which I need practical support with to maintain my day-to-day tasks. Well, yeah, you know what I mean. So there was a document written saying they would ensure that my daughter was protected from the situation I was going through, that she was not going to be harmed because I would be given enough support with my disabilities. Now later on, when the first evil social worker that came along, and I found out about a year later when I got all the case notes that she changed the notes. That document was already made, so I have that document as well. And she'd written new ones saying she changed the reason that I was asking for help from social services. And she had all these preconceived ideas about what a domestic abuse survivor was about. She told me that mums went back to violent partners that's their fault for putting the children in danger. Not the violent partner's fault for being violent. No, she said it's the mum's fault because they keep going back to these men. And she used to go to court. She told me she used to go to court to attack these women who were in the situations that it can lead to when you've experienced violence from your partner. She'd put that I was asking for help because I was afraid of being a single parent. She wrote that down. Not that I was unable to lift the baby because of my shoulder, which is actually the reason. When I was pregnant, leading up to the birth, we had meetings which I had to go to, and there were sometimes even more than 15 professional people at these meetings, you know, like a Zoom call. And they used to make me start, right, so how are things? Okay, I am here asking for physical help. When the baby's born, I'm not going to be able to lift him. What can we do? How can we manage this situation so that I can fulfill my role as a mother? And there were these calls. They were long. They were nothing. Nobody did anything. People said blah, blah, blah. Every time there was a call, it was so anxiety-provoking. They ignored the actual question, which was what practical support are we going to give to a disabled single parent. And by the time the birth was coming to be really close, there was nothing in place, and I had some input from a charity who put me in touch with someone who used to work as a midwife, and she gave some practical suggestions about how to practice holding. There was a weighted doll which weighed similar to a baby, and I could borrow the doll and try to move the doll and lift the doll, which I couldn't. It was awful. It just confirmed what I already knew, which is that I wasn't going to be able to lift the baby. And there were ideas thrown about me using a sling to carry the baby. I can't use a sling to carry the baby because I have an upper body. I have a disability with my upper body. So using a sling on my upper body is the worst idea. And that was stupid of them. And I was getting really more and more confused and worried about why isn't anyone actually saying what they're going to do to help me when the baby's born. And they didn't do anything. So when he was born, I just had to keep on trying to lift him. And, by the way, just trying to slip this minor point in, that when I was pregnant I nearly died because I had a blood clot on the placenta. And I was telling the people that were supposed to be helping me, I feel really dizzy, and I couldn't really get up because I was so lightheaded. And the specialist and doctor from the Countess told me later that me and my son could have died because of that blood clot. And I did have an emergency cesarean, and he was born and he was okay. He had to have some, vitamins to manage it, to get him back up to the right stable level. But we went home. So after about 3 weeks of me trying to lift him but not being able to, but doing it anyway, because I'm his mum and I love him and I'll do anything for my children. I'll do anything for anyone. That's the thing. I'm somebody who is, like I said right at the beginning, I'm very other focused. So if someone needs something and I can try to do anything about it, I will do it. I kind of forget that I'm here, and I'm not saying that's a good thing. I started to lose the use of my arms after that because I was still trying to do this movement which I couldn't actually physically do, and I couldn't, I got a lot more disabled. And I'd also had that thing, PGP, I think it is, when I was pregnant, so that was adding to the problem of not being able to walk around. Then I had to start taking my daughter to school because she was due to start school that September, and I'd had my son in May, June, July, August, September, so 3 to 4 months in, and I have no ability to sort of carry or walk, and I need to look after my son on my own and get my daughter to school every day and back. And I had a mobility scooter by this point, which I'd started using about a year earlier. A year earlier. And I had to take them on my knee. Can you imagine trying to like drive that thing and hold somebody on your knee when you can't use your arm, and one of them hold 2 people? It doesn't even bear thinking about. The baby he was a baby. He couldn't sit up or anything, and I couldn't use a sling because of my upper body disabilities. And yet, apparently, according to social services, I could get them to school and back by myself because I could put them on the scooter with me. It was so dangerous. And then the evil one that I've mentioned was writing notes about me saying that she saw me do such a thing, which, by the way, she didn't, because I didn't. So let's see how the DARVO comes into this. Okay, yeah, that's going to come in later. So eventually, like 6 months later, after that, when it got really desperate and I was having to contemplate giving up both of my children and just not be a mum anymore because I couldn't physically push myself to that level anymore, beyond my physical limits for like one more day. It got that bad that I was trying to organise having my children adopted, and that social worker said to me on the phone, we're children's services, we're going to pull back now because you don't need us anymore. It was just completely the opposite of how desperate I was, opposed to what she was saying on the phone was, well, you've done it so far. And I said, well, I can't lift him. It was really hard. Again, it's really hard to get something like that out of your mouth when you're in so much like cloud of other people's denial, which I grew up in a lot of that as well, that how can you get this through the smoke of like, I can't lift him. It's very basic. I can't lift him, she said. And she said to me, I've seen you. And then I was sort of, I trusted her. I trust everybody. I trusted her. Why wouldn't I? Because I've always trusted everybody. Because I'm so honest and open. I completely trust everybody because I know that I can be completely trusted. What I say is exactly what I mean. So if I believe that, that's what I'm saying. There's no possibility for me to not say exactly what I mean. So she said, I've seen you. And she'd been writing, I found out in the notes that she'd been writing things like, she said she was in pain, but I've seen her move a chair. And she said she needs help bathing the baby. Can you imagine holding a baby when you can't, what I couldn't do by then was I couldn't go like that. Like, it was impinged on this joint. So because I'd kept trying to use it through the injury and I couldn't do that anymore. So how can I hold a baby and give him a bath? No way. And she'd said things like, she'd written these things. She said she needs help. She can't bath him, but she said that I'd been seen giving him a bath. And she said that it didn't make sense because I could shower myself. Which, by the way, I couldn't. I had to shave my head at that point because I couldn't wash my hair anymore because I couldn't reach up. So I'd shaved off all my hair because I couldn't like wash it and dry it. After it got to the point of needing to ask someone to dry my hair for me, I just decided to just have all my hair cut off. Anyway, she said she can wash herself, so it doesn't make sense she can't look after, wash the baby. It's just complete BS. Then I'd become very desperate because I was having to look up my children being looked after by somebody else. Who is it going to be? There wasn't anybody. Nobody was really coming forward. I was trying to find relatives who would do it. There's another story around that, but I'm on 50 minutes now. I'll try and come back to that one because that's another very painful part of this, which is that my family situation is part of the reason, not all, but it's part of the reason I'd ended up in this mess, because there wasn't a supportive network there. And again, I'll just reinstate that everybody was trying with what they had available, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I was completely alone and completely unsupported physically and emotionally and mentally by them. Next, when I'm going to run out of time now. I want to tell you this whole thing. Okay, I'm going to have to come back to that part because it's very DARVO and there's so much more to say. It's a bit annoying, but then again, I've got like 50% of the story into 51 minutes, so that's quite good. You know, these things have been so jumbled. They were so jumbled at the time. Okay, so what happened was in the February, when I'd had him in the May, and then by the February I was past breaking point, and then I was told they're going to take away their involvement because I was doing fine and that I didn't need their help. And I was being told by the adult services, this is the other evil social worker, okay? She bought this whole idea from the first one, and she came up with this, they'd concocted, one or both of them made up this completely different persona about me. They said I was manipulative. And basically it came down to the fact they didn't believe in any of my health conditions, despite me having and showing them under their nose, like like specialists and people who've trained for a lot of years. Okay, so not only GPs but consultants and so on. I had letters and evidence which I showed them under their nose, stating my health conditions and stating things that hadn't worked and what I needed help with. And this second evil social worker was just, when she saw that, she was just kind of like, I don't know if I can show this on the camera, but she was sort of like, and then she just flounced out of the house. She just flounced out of the house because that didn't fit into her idea about who I was and what I was up to. Apparently I was up to making up all these things. So when she did that reassessment, which she forced me into without doing any reasonable adjustments for me to be able to manage in that situation with my disabilities, she refused. I have evidence of all this stuff. When she did that reassessment of me, and then I showed her that evidence, and then she flounced out, but she'd already told a whole group of people, including the police, that the doctor didn't support my diagnosis and that I didn't have any health conditions. And then somebody from the school reported at the meeting that I'd been seen walking out of my house and lifting my mobility scooter into the back of a car. If you've ever known somebody with a scooter, you see how heavy it is. And I can't even lift a plastic bag with a tissue in it. And nobody ever told me, they refused to tell me who said this thing. Who said they saw me walking out of my house, lifting the mobility scooter into a car? Who said that? They protected that person by not telling me who it was. So I could not just even say to them, what are you on about? Like, what are you on about? And after that, after I found out someone had said that, an anonymous person had said that in an official meeting with police, that I closed my blinds and I never opened them again. Like nowadays, this is like 3 years later, I still keep my blinds closed. I live in a different house, in a different part of town, but it was so awful to be judged by somebody looking at me and saying, you're doing such a thing and you're supposed to be disabled. So when that happened, I just closeted, is that a word? Closeted myself in my house for a few weeks, and it hasn't really lessened that much. So nowadays, like I said, I'm still in that kind of like, ouch, personal prison, trying to just be, I know that I'm real and what experience I'm having, and adding in somebody looking at it and making a different judgment is too much to cope with. It was too much to cope with mentally. So I'll just quickly try and squeeze in a couple of extra bits because I want to finish before an hour, which is that the first evil social worker she assigned a family support worker to me, and it was a male, and she asked me, are you okay that that's a male? And I'm a Muslim, so I felt very touched by this because I completely trusted her, and I didn't understand that people could have different, like read between the lines of what someone was saying. And I thought she was being very caring towards me to ask whether I was okay with having a male family support worker, and I said yes, I think it's going to be okay, and so on, which I was nervous about it, but I was trying to make the best of what support was being offered to me finally, because I needed it. She told him she told him, this is written in notes, I have evidence of this, that I had been inappropriate with workmen in my house and he was not allowed to visit me alone. She said that I was dressed inappropriately with workmen in the house, okay? I'm a conservative person. I cover most of my body because of my religion. I don't have any male friends. I'd just come out of an abusive relationship and was trying to just literally survive and keep my children alive on my own. And it's so ridiculous to be, someone said that she said I was kind of like a Scarlet Woman or something, trying to, this support worker wouldn't be safe to come into my house because what if I was scantily clad or something. It's so bizarre. But it's not that bizarre because this just happens. This is kind of, I'm not going to have time to explain it, but it's part of the DARVO when I get into that more, because I'd started to speak out and show that they weren't doing what they were supposed to do. They were supposed to give me various levels of support and types of support, and they weren't, and I wasn't surviving because of that. And the reaction when I found out what she'd written about that to me, I was flabbergasted. But when I informed the police about that, you know what they said? Oh, maybe it was the workman that helped you move. They didn't buy it. They didn't understand. She made this up. She said there was an incident. She wrote down, there was an incident where I was inappropriate. There's no incident. What incident? There wasn't an incident, so I was telling the police. It was a hate crime. It was recorded as a hate crime. Right, I've got lots more to say, but I'm quite proud of myself. I managed that within the time I wanted to. Thanks if this has been interesting. I appreciate you. And that's it for today.